Hello, and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and once again today we're dealing with staff tool strategies. And once again, we're looking at staff attributes. And more specifically than that, we're going to start looking at the alternate notation in the staff attributes window, which is in the appearance section here. It's the first option here, alternate notation. And when we press settings, we get the alternate notation dialog box where we can choose alternate notations. Now, initially, the normal notation will be checked, and so you may think that normal notation is an alternate notation, but I guess it's sort of the anti-alternate notation. But there's actually a good reason that this option exists in here, and I'll explain that towards the end of the video, I think. But if you just leave this box exactly as is and press OK, then you're not actually engaging in alternate notation. This will still remain unchecked. As soon as you select something else, like slash notation, now the appearance says that there is an alternate notation that exists for this staff. And when you have slash notation in this instance selected like that and press OK, then you will get slash notation for the entire guitar part. Because this is a staff attribute, it applies to the entire part, every single measure of guitar 1. Now, you may be surmising that the better way to use alternate notations is as staff styles, which, as I may have mentioned previously, are just temporary overrides to the staff attributes, and you'd be absolutely correct. Alternate notation is generally used more as a staff style. However, in order for a staff style to override something in the staff attributes, that thing also needs to exist in the staff attributes. So it is possible to create an alternate notation for the entire staff, and this is exactly what I'm doing in this case. Now I'm just going to OK here, just to kind of talk about the theory behind the alternate notation, because you may see this and look at and wonder what happened to the notes. Well, the thing about this is that the notes are actually still there. Even though it doesn't look like they do exist. In fact, if you go into Speedy Entry and click on one of these measures, you will see notes underneath these slashes until you get to this fifth measure here where I did not ever put data, and so it's blank, and so is every other measure, but you still see the slash notation. The way that I like to think about this is that the alternate notations are sort of like a skin that goes over top of the normal notation. The data still exists underneath that skin, which is why you would see these notes in Speedy Entry, and you can edit these notes in Speedy Entry as much as you need to. And sort of the important implication of this is that with all these notes here, they will play back. The other flip side of that is if you have slash notation, if I were to just keep writing chord changes here, nothing would play back because nothing exists underneath these slash notation measures. So that's sort of the theory behind it. And now let's just take a look at what some of those other alternate notations are. So I've showed you the slash notation. I'm going to move to my guitar 2 part here to show you the next one, which is rhythmic notation. And you select that one, and this is a little bit different than slash notation because now it's representing the rhythms of the notes that you had in the measure as this particular rhythmic notation. So you can see the difference in the slash notation. There's no rest, it's just 4 slashes a measure, versus this where you're actually seeing the actual rhythms of the notes. And when you go into the Speedy Entry, for example, you will still see the full chord, and you will still hear this full chord in playback. But you will also see the rests, and those chords will be represented by the slashes. And the slashes will replace even single notes. So you can see that these last 3 notes are still represented as slashes here. So that is the slash notation. Let's look at the next one here, which is blank notation. And click OK. And what you'll see is just that. You'll have blank notation except for the chords and the expressions and everything. But yet again, the notes still exist underneath the skin of blank notation until you get to that fifth measure when there's no actual notation there. The one after that, actually the next two are 1 bar repeats and 2 bar repeats, which would do just that. And obviously you can see that, with these 1 bar and 2 bar repeat alternate notations, that obviously it would make a lot more sense as a staff style because you'd never want to see just 2 bar repeats for the entire system here, or the entire staff. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense. But again, they do exist as alternate notations that are available for the staff attributes on the whole. We also have this blank notation with rest, which is different than the other one because we'll actually see those default rests as opposed to the other one where there's no default rests here. And just very quickly going back to the first two, there are a couple sub options here. In the slash notation, we do have this option to add dots to slashes in compound meters. And again, if you're in 6/8 or 12/8, then the dots will show with this option checked, but it is possible to uncheck that and just get plain slashes, 2 slashes in 6/8 and 4 slashes in 12/8 without the dots, which to me looks a little strange, but if you need to do it like that, you can. The rhythmic notation has a sub option for stems up. By default, the stems will go down as you see it in the graphic here, but if you choose the stems up option, there you go, you can see you can get this type of notation, which occasionally will come in handy. So that's the top 6 options. Those are the quote unquote alternate notation styles that you can choose. And of course, you have the normal notation. If you just choose that one, again, alternate notation gets unchecked here. What happens below that is where things get interesting. So if I were to just select one of these other notations here, what happens is that it will take this alternate notation and apply it to a specific layer. And that's where this bottom section comes into play. So you're saying choose slash notation applied to layer 1, 2, 3, 4, and you get to choose here. Within this layer that you've chosen, you have the option to show articulations, expressions, lyrics, and smart shapes in some circumstances. Not for slash notation, but for rhythmic notation, you would have the option to show smart shapes. The reason for that is that smart shapes are kind of attached to rhythms, and the only thing that you can get a rhythm in of these 6 options is the rhythmic notation. So that's why the smart shapes is only available for rhythmic notation here. More specifically, it's actually the smart shapes that get attached to notes, because smart shapes attached to beats and the measures will still show in the slash notation, just to clarify that a little bit. Below where it says apply to and you get to choose your layer, you also get to choose what happens in all of the other layers. And this would, in this case, I have applied to layer 1. This would include layers 2, 3, and 4 all together. You can't parse them out individually, unfortunately. It's always kind of one layer against all the other layers in this case. So with this slash notation, I've chosen, or this is the way it sets up automatically, to apply it to layer 1, but in the other layers, I do not want to show notes. I don't want to show articulations, expressions, and lyrics, and smart shapes is going to be grayed out unless you had notes checked, and then you can choose to check smart shapes or not. So you can kind of see what this means is that you can apply slash notation to layer 1, but if you wanted to see notes in layers 2, 3, and 4, you could just check that, and then only the layer 1 notes will get the skin over it, as it were, of the slash notation, right? If that makes sense. So there's a ton of flexibility here in terms of hiding and showing certain elements within certain layers in certain ways, and using different notations. It's a myriad of different options once you start playing with setting these up in interesting ways. Now, the other thing over here is that there's this all layers section, and it says chords and fretboards. I always wondered about this because when you uncheck chords in this case, it also unchecks it here in the items to display. I'm not sure if they just wanted the option in both places, but doing this, checking it or unchecking it will sort of mirror the way it is in the items to display. I suppose it's probably because with chords and fretboards, if you don't have an alternate notation, you can still hide the chords and fretboards with the items to display. But anyway, it appears in both places, but they are basically mirror options. Now, I just want to show you a couple of interesting applications of how to use this, but I am going to do a video later on. I think it's going to be 20-4. I'm going to talk a little bit more about alternate notation, specifically as they apply as staff styles, and give you a whole bunch of different ideas to use them. But just to illustrate a couple of ways that this works in this video here, let me just set something up here. So in my violin 1 part here, I have these notes in layer 1, and I have these arco and pits markings here. And what I did here is I entered these notes in layer 4 all the way down at the bottom of the keyboard. This sometimes happens when you have string parts that have key switches that are really low notes on the keyboard. You might run into something like this where the low key is actually switching the sound between arco and pits. It is possible to use VSTs like that in Finale and still, employ the key switches like that and put them in layer 4 in this instance, which is what I do. But you probably don't want to see that. So I'm going to show you how you would actually hide this using an alternate notation in the staff attributes. So I'm going to go to my staff attributes, alternate notation. Essentially what I want to do here is hide layer 4 and I'm going to do this with an alternate notation. So I'm going to choose blank notation with rests, right? This means that this will allow that any empty measures will actually have the rest as opposed to not having the rest. So that's why I'm choosing this one. But I'm going to apply the blank notation with rest only to layer 4, right? And then where it says other layers, it's all set up for me. I do want to show notes, articulations, expressions, lyrics, and smart shapes. So basically everything in layers 1, 2, and 3 will essentially be normal notation. It's just layer 4 that's getting the blank notation with rests. And if I click OK and then click OK, what you'll see happen is that the layer 4 notes now disappear. Or rather, they don't disappear. If you remember the theory, they are still there. They're just being hidden by that layer of blank notation that's covering layer 4. So you can see, if I go into speedy entry and go all the way down here, you'll actually see those notes. Now, the neat thing is that this is applied to the entire violin 1 staff. So anytime you have to put in another key switch like this for the arco or pits, you can put that note all the way in layer 4 and it will never, ever, ever show up. In fact, if I do that here, I'm going to go up to layer 4 and enter that low note there. You'll see it just doesn't appear. It's there, but it just doesn't appear in your score. So that's an interesting way to use that blank notation applied to a specific layer, showing everything else. Another interesting thing that can be done with a alternate notation situation here is that I can choose normal notation here and apply it to a certain layer, and then disengage one of these options to show a specific element from layer 2 in this case. So what I have here, what I kind of wanted to do is I have these staccato markings on the layer 2 notes here. Now, I may have just put those because that's how I want to hear Finale to play it, but it's possible I really don't want the player to see it like that. So what I can do here is choose normal notation applied to layer 2, except don't show articulations, which means that only the articulations in layer 2 will get hidden by this alternate notation. Again, with other layers, so layers 1, 3, and 4, all the notes and all the articulations will still get shown. All right, and when I click OK and OK, you'll see that those staccato markings will only go away for layer 2. However, if I were to take layer 1 here and put an accent on the whole note there, that will still be able to appear because I'm showing the articulations in all the other layers. So there's a lot of really nifty things that you can do with this alternate notation. And all I did was actually apply a normal notation to layer 2. With just deselecting the no articulations. So really all I'm doing, if you're thinking about it as a skin, is I'm only putting in a skin of hiding layer 2 articulations over top of this, if that makes sense. Again, the articulations are still there, they're just not showing. So this is sort of a way around the fact that in the items to display section, we don't have articulations expressions, although we do have lyrics, but we don't have articulations expressions or smart shapes. So this would actually be the only way to kind of hide these elements on a staff-by-staff basis. In fact, if you didn't want to see any articulations, all you really need to do is just uncheck it here, but also uncheck it here. And now you're not going to see articulations in layers 2, 1, 3, or 4 in this case. So again, there's just so many options here depending on what you need to do and for what reason. Now, you don't have to choose this for normal notation. You can do this for slash notation and, not show expressions on layer 2 or however it is you need to set up. I mean, the sky is the limit the way this window is set up here. So, that's the theory behind it. That's what's going on. Hopefully this makes a lot of sense. As I mentioned, later on in the series, I'm going to do another video that kind of touches on some other tips and tricks for how to use these alternate notations, more specifically as staff styles, because as I mentioned, it's a little bit more useful as a staff style, as a temporary override. But there are cases where it is really handy, particularly in that string case where I'm hiding the key switches, where it's kind of handy to be able to do that for the entire staff in that case. So that's how that works. That is the alternate notation for staff attributes. I hope this has helped. I hope you've learned something today, and I appreciate you watching. And come back soon. The next video is going to be on the note head font, note shapes, and stem settings in the staff attributes, so that'll get a little fun. All right, so once again, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. My name is Jason, and I will see you soon on the next video.